Hi, my name is Samantha Saxe, and this is my persuasive speech as to why you should not be getting the flu shot this year. So, just a little background on what influenza is. Pretty much everybody I talk to thinks that the flu is a stomach illness which causes vomiting and diarrhea, maybe a fever. But what influenza actually is an upper respiratory virus that causes shortness of breath, decreased oxygen levels, and is commonly treated with antivirals and nebulizers, which is a mist that you breathe in. So a little background on influenza. 1933 was when researchers discovered exactly which virus was to blame for influenza. But actually there was a few different strains of viruses, and we're still kind of figuring out which ones those are. In 1938, Jonas Salk and Thomas Francis developed the first influenza vaccine. This was mostly used for our troops overseas. So it was nearly 40 years later that the flu vaccine was linked to Guillain-Barré syndrome. We'll talk about that later. Within this speech, we're going to cover first why it is ineffective in elderly and children. Second, what Guillain-Barré actually is, how it is deadly, can be deadly, and is costly. And finally, why the ingredients in the flu vaccine can be toxic and harmful. So, flu vaccinations can have deadly side effects. So for my first main point, flu vaccinations are ineffective in the elderly and in children. So NPR had published a radio tribute, I guess, to influenza that had a man named Jordan Calms on it, and he stated that 31 published studies since 1998 showed that the flu vaccination was only moderately effective for adults and was much more lacking for our elderly population, which is 65 and above. He also goes on to state that between 3,000 and 49,000 Americans die each year due to influenza. This number varies greatly because influenza is very unpredictable. So with it being unpredictable, scientists have to regenerate the flu vaccine each year. So what they're actually doing is guessing on which strain is going to be most heavily infecting people during that year. So pretty much we're injecting people with a vaccine that's just a guess. Another article, which Dr. Williams, who is a biochemist and chiropractor, he had stated within his article that the flu shot for children has zero impact on doctor visits or hospitalizations each year. He goes on to say that the flu vaccine actually has no more effect on kids than a placebo would. So to review my first point, we can see why the flu vaccine is ineffective in elderly and the children. So for my second main point, we're going to discuss Guillain-Barré. It's not only costly, but can be deadly. So the Journal of Infectious Disease describes Guillain-Barré as a rare, acute, rapidly ascending paralysis. So it's going to happen fast, and it's going to move from your toes all the way to your head. When it reaches about your chest region, that's when we start to worry that it's going to cut off your airway and can potentially kill you. So the flu vaccine is directly linked to this Guillain-Barré syndrome. Now, the article goes on to say that although the mortality rate is low, this is because of intensive care. So you're going to be getting ventilated, IVs, feeding tubes, catheters. It's all potential to happen with Guillain-Barré syndrome. So later in the article, they go on to state the cost of Guillain-Barré, and that's about $320,000 per year in America. So now we can see why Guillain-Barré is potentially deadly and extremely costly. So to move on to my third point, we're going to discuss why the ingredients to the flu vaccine can be potentially harmful. Now, before we talked about Dr. Williams, who was a biochemist and chiropractor. He had written another article that stated that there's controversial additives used in the flu vaccine. Now, we know that mercury has been taken out of a lot of products that we have used, such as thermometers and things like that. But within the flu vaccine, there is a toxin called thermosil, which is a mercury-based preservative. Each flu vaccine has about 25 micrograms of this thermosil, which is a brain and immune system toxin that can cause them to dysfunction. So they decided that they were going to try to come out with a different type of immunization. So now they've come out with this flu mist, which is a live virus that is injected into your nose through a spray. So these genetically or laboratory developed viruses that are injected into this new flu mist have one concern, and that is that they can potentially shed their cell wall, making them contagious to other people. So say you get the flu mist and you go home and you have somebody that's immunocompromised, you could potentially pass it on to them. Now, immunocompromised people are people who have received donor organs, who receive chemotherapy or take steroids long term. So, reviewing my third main point, we see as to why the flu vaccine has ingredients that could be potentially harmful and toxic. Now, speaking about all these past three main points, one being how the flu vaccine is ineffective in elderly and children, second, how it can cause Guillain-Barré syndrome and how costly that can be, and third, the toxic ingredients that it contains, I want to ask you, is it worth missing school, work, or even potentially spreading it onto one of your loved ones to receive a flu vaccine that is just a guess or might potentially not work? It's all a question to ask. Now remember, the next time you get asked if you want a flu vaccine, remember that it's just a guess. It has many side effects that can be potentially deadly and are costly and might not even be effective. Thank you and have a good day.